Welcome to Trash Compactor. I'm Josh. It recently made the rounds in the news that James Earl Jones, arguably best known for his iconic voice, has retired from providing the voice for Darth Vader, for which he is so famous. That character's recent appearance on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series seemed to feature James Earl Jones's voice, but the performance was actually computer generated by a Ukrainian AI company called Respeecher, the same software that was used to recreate the voice of a young Mark Hamill when Luke Skywalker showed up on The Mandalorian. The implications of AI being able to recreate speech aside, there's one thing that I think of whenever someone talks about James Earl Jones's iconic voice. It's the first thing I think of, because James Earl Jones has a stutter. He stuttered his entire life since he was a child, and there's some irony, I think, that the person with arguably the most famous voice on the planet has struggled to speak his entire life. The following is from the Instagram account for the wonderful podcast Proud Stutter. It quotes Jones as saying, "One of the hardest things in life is having words in your heart that you can't utter." End quote. In an interview on the Dick Cavett Show in 1995, "I can't string ideas and words together that well," the actor admitted. And James Earl Jones isn't the only Star Wars actor with a stutter. Samuel L. Jackson, best known to Star Wars fans as Mace Windu, revealed a few years ago that he too grew up with a stutter that he still suffers from. From a GQ article quoting from an appearance that Jackson made on the Howard Stern show, he said, "I stuttered really, really, really bad for a long time, to the point that I stopped speaking for like almost a year in school," Jackson shared. The cure? The word motherfucker. Actually. Why? "I have no idea," Jackson says, "but it just does. It clicks a switch that stops the da-da-da-ba-ba-ba." Through reading about breathing exercises, Jackson was able to improve his stutter, which is pretty remarkable. Okay, at this point, you're probably asking yourself why I'm talking about stuttering so much. Well, because I have a stutter. It's something I've struggled with my entire life since I learned to talk. Some days are worse than others. Sometimes it's hardly noticeable. Some days I can hardly get a word out. It's different sounds. The rules kind of change, which makes it kind of tricky, not knowing what kind of a day it's going to be fluency wise. But it's something that I always have to deal with, and has shaped me in ways I'm not sure that even I'm aware of. And joining me today to talk about stuttering and podcasting as a stutterer and how stuttering is represented in media is the host of the wonderful podcast I mentioned earlier called Proud Stutter. I'm very excited and honored to introduce you to Maya Chupkov, the host of Proud Stutter. Maya, welcome to Trash Compactor.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this.
So am I. So am I. Um, and First off, I just really want to thank you for creating your show. When I discovered it, I was honestly pretty overwhelmed. Um, it, um, it was very emotional for me hearing people talk openly about stuttering and not in the context of how to cure it or how to overcome it, but why it it can and should be something to embrace. And uh, I had never encountered that before, so it was very emotional uh, for me to hear your show, which again is really fantastic. I'm probably going to end up saying that many times in this discussion, but um, and in that spirit, uh, I usually spend a lot of time on the back end of the production side of this. When I edit the podcast, some people, they say something that they misspoke, or they say something that ends up going nowhere, and it's sort of a. I also work as a professional editor, so I just have like an editor's impulse. But at least 50%, I would say, of the time I spend editing this podcast is spent cutting out my stutters and my what I call like junk words and junk phrases. Um, and in the spirit of your show, I am not going to do that for this one. I'm going to see if I can stand to leave them all in. So
Yay.
so so enough of me talking. Please tell us about Proud Stutter, your podcast. How did it come about, and what are you trying to do with it?
Proud Stutter came from a very, dark place, actually. I was, very but right before I thought of the idea, I was very miserable at my job. Um, it was really hard for me to wake up in the morning, and this was during the pandemic, and so even though I wasn't physically going to work, I still felt very anxious every time I would walk over to my computer, and that just made me realize I needed something outside of work that I could look forward to, and so Proud Stutter was really born from this yearning to nurture the creative side of myself because I've been neglecting that part of myself for so long, and podcasting is such it's in there isn't really a huge barrier to entry. So I was able to get a grant to buy equipment. And yeah, I just started recording and I had my best friend to help out too as a co host and an editor. And as soon as we started, we just kept creating more and more episodes, inviting guests. And then it turned into this outpouring of support as people began to discover the show and felt a sense of being seen for the first time. And so that really made me want to continue doing it. And really, Proud Stutter is all about helping people who stutter feel less alone, feel like they have a community, and really reframing the narrative around stuttering to being something to be accepted and not overcome because so many of us with a lifelong stutter stopping stuttering is not in the cards for us, and so it's really just about getting the weight off your shoulders of trying to put pressure to get rid of something that might you may not ever get rid of, and so that's really what Proud Stutter is all about, and it's also changing representation in the media. So as you said before, like there isn't a lot of representation of stuttering in the way that we can resonate with. And so the podcast is also about that as well.
So, it's really interesting to me. You said that you were in a place where you really felt like you needed to do something to nurture yourself and indulge your creative side, and there's a low barrier to entry to podcasting. Um, I have a very similar experience with this podcast for similar reasons, but why did you decide to, or how did you decide to make the subject of your podcast stuttering? Because so you are a lifelong stutterer yourself, right?
Right.
Um, it's not. It seems a very interesting subject for your first podcast to be, something that is very personal and potentially sensitive. So I'm just curious why, how you arrived at the idea to make a podcast about stuttering.
Yeah, it was definitely not an immediate thought because stuttering was never something I was comfortable with talking about with hardly anyone, including my family and friends. That was definitely not something that came easily to me. Actually, the like my first kind of ideas around a podcast was okay, what am I an expert in? That was my first my first question to myself, and I was like, oh, I love books. I love talking about books, so that was definitely an idea I had. Um, and so I had other ideas too, but then my fiancé, he was like, "Why don't you do it about stuttering?" And he's always been very curious about my stutter. Like he's always asked me, "Oh, like why did you stutter in this situation and not this one?" I don't know. He just always kind of would ask me, and I'd be like, "I don't know. It's just random." Like that would be my response a lot. And so, but as soon as he said that, a light bulb kind of went off in my head. I was still afraid to kind of take that leap, and so what I started to do was like taking small steps to open up to people about my stutter. And that's when I realized I was on to something, because the response from people when I would open up to them was really, I felt like I was making a connection for the first time with people, because I was no longer hiding such a big part of myself. And so the more I did that with people, the more I felt like I was actually making authentic connections. And I had this huge realization that my whole life I kind of went through relationships on a very surface level basis, because I would constantly be hiding my stutter. And so I didn't realize that until the moment where I started to share to people that I stutter.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense to me. It's just sort of, I mean, I had that experience hearing your podcast as well. I was like, "Oh my god, like why has this never happened before? I can't believe this exists. I can't believe I found it. I can't believe someone is doing this." And that's why it was like, when you live with something that is a struggle that's invisible, um, you know, especially when it's something that is just it becomes second nature, like your thought process about it, the way you change your behavior, it's just all sort of these automatic things that you do. It's unconscious. It becomes unconscious. You stop like noticing it yourself. So, to I mean, again, like that you I'm so glad that you had that light bulb moment because it has certainly impacted me, and I know from the response that your show has gotten, it, it, it is impacting a lot of other people, and it just only continues to grow. Um, I mentioned in the intro James Earl Jones and Samuel L. Jackson in particular, and it's interesting when most people talk about stuttering, especially celebrities, and there are a lot of celebrities who stutter who you wouldn't know stutter through some, combination of. I think all stutterers um, kind of build their own toolkit of techniques that kind of work for them, and it's not the same for everyone. Um, but like when James Earl Jones and Samuel L. Jackson, when they talk about stuttering, they always talk about it, and this isn't uncommon, but they talk about it in the context of of uh, of of overcoming it. And I, I was particularly struck about the Samuel L. Jackson quote because he uses the word cure. And in fact, the headline of that GQ article was How Samuel L. Jackson Cured His Stutter. That's that framing, that idea that it's not only something that can be cured, but it should be cured, right?
Mhm.
Or that it has to be cured. You need to figure out how to cure it. How do you feel when you hear that sort of language about stuttering?
Yeah, I feel that there's this pressure for me to kind of, yeah, like I when I hear the word overcoming, I think of hiding, because there's
Mm,
no overcoming stuttering for me. I'm just hiding it more. And so, and hiding it involves a level of energy, and it involves mental capacity, and it involves like hiding a sense of identity and self, and that can be psychologically harmful too. And so so that word is just, it's not something that I think we should be equating with the stuttering experience, because there's so many different types of stuttering experiences, and a lot of them don't aren't like that overcoming story is not every experience around stuttering. Like a lot of people, like there's some people who do overcome it, and they grow out of it. That's kind of a better word. But for a lot of people who carry stuttering into their adulthood, there isn't a cure for it.
Right, no, exactly. My understanding, um, and you're probably much more familiar with the current research and thinking surrounding stuttering than I am, but my understanding was always a lot of children develop stutters, and most of them grow out of it. Some of them don't, right?
Right.
And for the ones who don't, there isn't really a cure. Uh, quote cure. And it was actually really interesting because in that same article, that GQ article, that the headline of which was "How Samuel L. Jackson Cured His Stutter," it says at the very end, it acknowledges that it's something that Jackson still struggles with now, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
even in the same article, there was that tacit admission that there is no such thing as a cure for stuttering. I did find it really interesting, though. Speaking of uh, the tools and techniques that are not the same for everybody, saying the word "motherfucker" is not one that I had ever come across before. I thought that was pretty unique. Um, I should maybe try it sometime. But and yeah, so I think that thinking about it, that thinking around it as something to overcome or something that can be cured, I think is directly related to depictions of stuttering and people who stutter in popular media. Usually, if a character stutters in TV or a movie, like it's the butt of a joke,
Mhm.
or um, the fact that they stutter is to denote their like helplessness or their weakness. Um, I always, whenever a character stutters in a movie, I always like involuntarily cringe. Like I don't even.
Mhm.
It's not even. I mean, maybe it's self-explanatory, but it's like it's not even a thought process. It's like a physical, visceral
Yeah.
reaction. I'm just wondering if there are any examples of stuttering represented in media that stand out to you as either, something that you just always remember that maybe wasn't so great, or one that was great. Though to be honest with you, I can't think of a good one.
Yeah, so I'll give an example of each. So the example I always think of where I have that same physical reaction and anger and just yeah, is I mean, yeah, so this probably isn't the best example, but it's the one that I always think about because I'm a big fan of The Office,
Hmm.
and there's a really popular meme that came out of an episode where one of the characters, Stanley, in a joking way, um, shouts at Michael, the main character, like, "Did I stutter?" as like a joke. And I just hate that phrase. It's used way too often, even in very recent examples, like the recent Stranger Things show season. They use that phrase. And so that one is just really annoying because it implies that stuttering, you're unsure of yourself, or it's just a horrible phrase because just because a person stutters doesn't mean they don't know what they want to say or they're unsure. And so that is a very annoying phrase that's still used and should stop being used. And then a good example, and I had like the most, like, I just felt so physically like amazing when I saw this film because it really nailed stuttering for me. And I definitely saw that the character I saw myself in the character. And so the movie that I'm thinking of is It. It's an adaptation from Stephen King's novel. The main character stutters in the novel, and the main character stutters in the adaptation. And yeah, he's like the hero, and he stutters similar to how I stutter. It's consistent, or it's not like every word, but it's consistent enough where you can kind of tell. Um and I feel like when I was growing up, I would experience instances where I would stutter similar to how he stutters. And I just felt like very like that he really did his homework and he did a great job and he's a good actor. And so that was a great example, and I tell everyone that that's like the one of the best um characters who stutters, and it makes me want to read the novel now because um Stephen King, like, yeah, like, and I have it on my to-do list to email Stephen King and be like, "Hey, thank you for having a main character who stutters. Like, what was your thought process behind why you chose that?" Because I've been trying to figure out if he's ever mentioned it, and I haven't gotten down to like why he chose a person who stutters as his character. So, yeah.
That's actually really interesting. I haven't seen that movie, and I think had I known that the main character stuttered, or that there was any character that stuttered in the movie, probably would have made me not want to go see it. But um, but
Mhm.
uh, hearing you say that, that's just shot up to the top of my to watch list, for
It's
sure.
not the
And
best movie, like so I'm just gonna say that it's really, like, quite an awful movie, but but the stuttering's good and the kid actors are actually pretty good actors, so it's just the whole plot is just very yeah, so, you know.
well, so that's actually interesting that you phrase it that that way, because something that I is kind of a thing that I'm trying to deconstruct or kind of change the framing around is, you know classifying movies as either just good movies or bad movies, because like you like there are other reasons why you can enjoy watching a movie than it's how it measures up to some sort of like objective grade scale, right, of like
Mhm.
cinematic worthiness or quality, right? So I mean, so the fact that you can see that that movie, and it can, you know really stir something in you and sticks with you, um you know uh, I would call that a good movie then.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I love the movie, like, but it's yeah, and so but I have to be careful about who I recommend it to for those reasons.
I
Yeah.
understand. I understand. I host a Star Wars podcast, and even among Star Wars fans, there are certain Star Wars that I know not to recommend to certain people based on certain other things about them. Okay, I'm just that answer really surprised me, because I wasn't expecting you uh to have an example of good depiction of stuttering. The one that I had is like not so bad, was there was one in um a recent Star Wars movie, actually. Well, I guess 2017 isn't all that recent anymore. What what do you think of as recent? Is 5 years ago recent? I don't know. But there was a character called DJ played by Benicio del Toro, and that character had a stutter, and it was presented more as kind of like a quirk or like an affect, you know, like not that he was like weak or that he was. I don't think it was supposed to be funny. Maybe it was actually now that I'm thinking about it, but like it was just sort of to me, it just seemed like it was there to give the character something distinct about him. I didn't really feel like uh, there was like like something you were supposed to read into it. Though now
Mhm.
that I'm talking about it, he did eventually prove to be untrustworthy. So maybe that's not such a great example. I don't know. Um, but but that actually reminds me of something. So first off, I could recommend so many episodes of your show. I mean, basically all of them. But one that stands out because it was recent was you did an episode where you interviewed a woman named Gina Chin Davis, who's a writer and a filmmaker who grew up with a stutter, who just came out with her first feature called I Can't Sleep. Um, and not only did she sound amazing and I want to be her best friend, but she said something that stuck with me. She said she can't wait until there's a character in a movie that stutters and no one comments on it. Uh, that like no one in the movie like even says the word stutter, right? Like it's just a thing about them. Um, like and it's interesting because she was talking about intersectionality, which you know she's biracial and and a woman, and um I think thinking of stuttering as a disability or as something to deal with like does inform and interact with a lot of your other identities and personal challenges. So it's interesting. Like, do you think we'll ever get to a point where stuttering is not something that's like read into as having to mean something the same way that I would say race and gender sexuality is sort of getting there. Like we're sort of I think moving out of the place where you only see movies exclusively about that subject, and it's now just sort of quote unquote normalized. It's just there and it doesn't mean anything. Do you think we'll ever get there with stuttering?
I think we will. I think we're farther behind than a lot of the other disabilities stories, and um I think like I'm seeing more nuanced and like more well-rounded characters with different disabilities, that it's not just about the disability that's just kind of part of them, but they have other parts being brought out in their characters. Um but stuttering still just has such a long way to go, because I think there's just not a lot of stories and education out there as much as there needs it to be. And that's why that's why I'm just trying to get this podcast out there as much as possible, so that it can pave the way for more nuanced stories around stuttering. So that, like, if there's someone that's working on a TV show and they are working with someone with a character that stutters, or they'll be able to do research and find more to kind of work with, so that we do see more of that nuanced storytelling around stuttering. But I just feel like there's not enough amplification around stuttering right now. And so the more that we tell stories about stuttering, I think we will get there.
That's a good answer. It's interesting. Like I'm of two minds about that. Like, uh, one, I hope you're right. I genuinely do, but just also, and maybe it is just this internalized shame or frustration, I think, less than shame. It's like I'm not ashamed. It's just frustration.
Mhm.
Um, you know, because I agree with everything that you're saying. Like, and I know it's important because it was impactful for me and has been impactful for me to hear your podcast and listen to people's stories. Just to hear it be talked about openly, hearing people's experiences and either um seeing myself relating directly or hearing something that is not how I experience it is also just as um illuminating and useful for me to hear. But for me at least, uh, the fact of the matter is, like, sometimes there's no getting around it. It's just it can be really frustrating when you're trying to communicate and you know what you want to say. It's not that you don't know the exact right words that you want to say, but you literally can't say it. And again, like, your show really, I think, brought to the surface a lot of things that I had sort of uh shoved down and not, really thought about in a long time. But I yeah, like, sometimes, like, I just get so frustrated. Like, as someone who clearly is someone that has a lot of opinions and likes to talk, right? It's
Mhm.
it's just like, why can't I always say what I want to say? I know what I want to say and I give it a lot of thought. Though it has also occurred to me that maybe the reason I give it a lot of thought is because I know that I'm not always able to say what I want to say. So when I know that I will be able to say it, I want to make sure that I say exactly what I mean, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, I think something that I always try to emphasize is, like, yes, my show is called Proud Stutter, and yes, I talk about a lot of the positives around stuttering, but I still stutter at the end of the day, and I still am not able to say exactly what I want to say, how I want to say it. Like, sometimes I use a word that isn't the best word because it's
But
easier
you can
to
say it.
say.
But you can say it, you can't say the
Exactly.
other one. Yeah,
And so
yeah.
and it's so frustrating because I know I'm intelligent, but sometimes I say things that aren't exactly the right grammar, or like all these things, because it's like that's how I hide my stutter. And sometimes it's easier for me to say things the wrong way than for me to say things the right way and stutter. And I'm trying not to do that as much. I'm trying to, like, stutter more freely, but I've taught myself these techniques for my whole life, and it's so hard to unlearn them. And yeah, it's hard to, like, yeah, it's hard to, like, change a lot of those things, despite the fact that I have a podcast and I'm, like, out as as a stutter. There's still just so much there still to peel away. It's like a never-ending onion, honestly.
No, it absolutely is. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge, like, what you just described, that is, I can't properly express how hard I relate to what you just said. Like, so many times I will say something that is not either grammatically or the most succinct or the it's not the best word. I know a better word, or like the I want to say it a different way, but
Mhm.
I know that I'm not going to be able to say this sound, or I'm not going to be able to get it out, and I have this roundabout way of saying it, or I have a phrasing that maybe is not something that I would say, but I know it's something that people say, so I'll just say it that way because I know that I can make the sound, right? And it's
Mhm.
also kind of like reading your audience. Like, who are you talking to, right? Like, is it more important that I sound like I know what I'm talking about, or is it more important that I get this out fast?
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
it's like those kinds of like of considerations, those mental calculations that are always kind of running that you were talking about before. Like it's exhausting
Mhm.
to be constantly having to think about this. Um, and like I went, like I, for me, you know, while it is something that has given me challenges, um, in my life, I'm not going to ask you this question because I don't think it's a fair question to ask. But I think if I had a chance to snap my fingers and make my stutter go away, I don't think I would, because I think it has made me a much more empathetic and understanding person, and I value that more than fluency.
Yeah. And it also makes us more interesting and more layered
I like to think so.
because yeah, I mean, I think that way cuz I feel um like yeah, I don't know, I just always felt this yeah, I don't know. I always had this urge to tell stories. Like, I don't know. That's just like I since I was little, I just always wanted to tell stories and to like just be vocal about things. And I just always thought of myself as boring and like not like and just like wanting to tell other people's stories who were more fascinating. And I kept ignoring stuttering, like, it didn't even cross my mind that this was, like, an interesting thing about me until I started the podcast, but I just always felt myself being very, like yeah, just, like, just not a very interesting person, and I feel like Proud Stutter has really opened up this opportunity to, like, just really educate the world about something a lot of people don't understand. And one story is not gonna do that. It's gonna take a lot of stories.
Yeah, there's a lot there in what you just said. I just want to acknowledge, what you said about you not feeling like you're an interesting person, and um, y- you know, I, I want to dispel that. I mean, first of all, like I think you're an incredibly interesting and accomplished and super interesting person. So I just want to say that. But my form of it, of what I think you're talking about, um, like as someone who also wants to tell stories, it clearly wants to communicate, right? Thinks that they have things in their head that are worth sort of expressing and uh, putting out into the world, right? Um, like I used to, and I still struggle with this. Like, it's like, what? It's like, what? Why me? Like, what's so special about my insight?
Mhm.
Like, why should somebody listen to me about anything?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's it's sort of s- uh, it's sort of adjacent, like a slightly different flavor of what I think you're talking about, right?
Right.
Um, and I think, for what it's worth, from what I've learned, is the to let that be the reason why you don't write something or tell a story or make something, whatever. Like, I think the simple fact that you feel the burning need, the desire to do it, means that you are interested in other people. If you're interested in stories and in other people's stories, I think that reflects on you. I think you have to be an interesting, curious person on your own if that's so meaningful to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually
Maybe.
never no, I love that, and I actually never really thought of it that way, but I think That is a really good point. And um yeah, and I think that's why I was able to stick out podcasting for so long, cuz so many people give up on podcasting as soon as they start cuz they realize how much work goes into it.
It's a lot of
Um
work. Mad respect, because I know it's a lot of work.
And I feel like it's really the people that push through are the ones that are just like they have, it's like they're driven by a passion for the need to tell stories and to, yeah, all that stuff.
No, no, I think you're exactly right. Um, okay, because this is nominally a Star Wars podcast, are you at all familiar with Star Wars, or are you a fan? Have you not seen any of them, the movies at all? Like, uh, what's your familiarity level with Star Wars?
So I've seen episode 1, and I believe what that means is it's the 4th movie created because like they go in
Yes,
reverse order or something. I don't know. There's
yes,
like
very good.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I know I've seen episode 1, which I'm told is the worst one, so, um, by many Star Wars fans, but yeah, I had I had it, like, I was gonna spend, like, a weekend to I just wanted to watch all of them in order, and so I watched the first one, and then I stopped because I was like, "I don't have time for this," and so I haven't watched the others, but I still have an urge to watch the movies, it's just I just haven't done it yet.
No, it's okay. You do not have to justify your decision to stop watching them after watching episode 1. The opinion that you just expressed about the quality of that movie is not is not uncommon. Oh, well, I don't know. Let me ask you because there is so much Star Wars content now. Like there are all of these new, not just movies, but new shows like on Disney Plus. Like there's a new Star Wars show on basically year round at this point. It's kind of insane, and like the approach that they're taking is to kind of, you know, it's sort of like the Marvel approach, where there are sort of different flavors and different like styles with different tones. Like some lean toward the the very serious, and some are a little more lighthearted, and like, just different stuff. What kind of movies do you like, or TV shows do you like? Like, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I like the movies that really have different layers and really makes you think, like, Um, so yeah, I like ones with like that you're kind of second guessing characters and their motives and if they're a mix of bad and good. And so I like very intricate plot lines, I guess. So those are like the movies I enjoy. I'm not a big fan of like the very cliche movies, like with the same storylines, like predictable, I guess, is the
Yeah.
word I'm thinking of. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like, have you seen the movie Nope?
Yes.
Okay, I love that movie because it kind of didn't make sense plot wise. Like there wasn't really like there was a plot, but it was kind of like it was just a very like, weird movie, but in a beautiful way. So that's kind of the vibe
Yeah.
I like.
Okay. Well, in that case, i- if you ever find some time on your hands and you're looking for something to watch, and you're curious about checking out something Star Wars related, I I would recommend one of two of the new Disney Plus shows, either The Mandalorian or the one that's on right now, um, Andor. It's called. I think I actually think that one you might really, really respond to.
Okay.
Like I like full disclosure. So it just I think we just passed the halfway mark of its 10 episode first season, and it is so good. Like not just for Star Wars. Actually, it's so good that I actually think it weirdly makes it an odd fit for Star Wars because it's so
Mm.
good. Like it's so good that it's like that maybe makes it not Star Wars enough, if that makes any sense. It's like it's
Yeah.
it's it's so good that I actually see this happening on like Star Wars Twitter or whatever. There are these two camps kind of forming where some are like, this is the greatest thing for Star Wars that we have a show that's this good, like of this caliber. And there are some Star Wars fans that are like, yeah, but like it's not Star Wars because
Mm.
like Star Wars isn't the things
Yeah.
that the show is doing, right? Like, and I've had a similar sort of reaction, like a weird kind of an existential uh kind of reaction. I'm like, but it is so good. So what is Star Wars? Like, what do I actually like about Star Wars if I love this like so much and it's not necessarily like Star Warsy? Like, what does that actually mean? But anyway, I won't bore you with those details, but I would recommend the show Andor, which is on Disney Plus right now. And if you're looking for something still kind of accessible, but like a little lighter, but still has some twists and turns, The Mandalorian is a good one. That's where Baby Yoda comes from. I don't know if you're familiar with that from just like general culture, but that's where that comes from.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool.
S- uh, Sorry, I feel weird. After everything we just said, I feel weird talking about Star Wars that I think you should watch.
No,
um,
I love it. I feel like I am a nerd, and so I just feel like as like I have a feeling that I will like it because I am a nerd and I am like there are a lot of nerdy things I like. And not saying Star Wars fans are nerdy, but like I just love
no, it's. I mean, like, I, I wouldn't disagree with you. I don't think you're wrong, and I don't take it as an insult.
I just love like being sucked into like worlds, like different worlds
Watch
and
Andor.
okay.
Watch Andor. Uh, you saying that like this has moved from a hey, if you have the time, to like a very earnest recommendation. I
Yeah,
think
no,
you'll
okay, yeah. I will take
I
you up
think
on
you'll
it.
like it.
It's just I have
Okay.
to get Disney Plus now, which I is the only streaming service I don't have pretty
Oh,
much.
okay. Well, yeah. Well, that could be a challenge. Well, yeah. Um, Maybe find a friend and share their
Yeah.
share their login. uh,
Exactly,
uh,
yeah.
so that part, so that part, I might cut out of the episode, even though I said I wasn't going to cut anything out. I might cut that part out. I
Okay.
do not endorse. I do not endorse breaking
Yes.
the terms of service. I am not advocating for account sharing. Is my point. That is my official stance on that subject. Um, Maya, what are you most proud of about what you've accomplished with Proud Stutter, but also the advocacy that you do? Because you went to school for I don't know what you call it, like professional advocacy, right? No, am I making that up?
So, yeah, I went to school for public affairs
Okay.
and through like volunteering on campaigns and like just literally
Hmm.
volunteering my time and learning how advocacy works um and through experience um like getting involved in non-profits and community organizing. That's kind of how I learned about organizing, and so that's why I realized that I needed to do that as part of Proud Stutter because there are only so few places that do advocacy around stuttering on such a local level. So yeah, proudest moment by far is getting San Francisco to recognize National Stuttering Awareness Week, which is the second week of May every year. So that was definitely amazing, and I can't wait to do it in other cities now too.
No, and I should also mention, as a time we're recording this podcast, 2 days ago, October 22nd, was International Stuttering Awareness Day. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, which is something that has existed since 1998. I think it says something that I first became aware of International Stuttering Awareness Day through your podcast and your social media feed. So I think uh, so. First off, so thank you for that. But also, I think that that speaks to your larger mission of increasing awareness and the conversation and perception of stuttering. Um, so, Maya, so if someone is now curious and they want to listen to Proud Stutter or learn more about the work that you do, how can they find you? How can they listen to the show? How can they find you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to just type in Proud Stutter in your favorite listening app, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of those. Just type in Proud Stutter and we should show up. And you can follow us by going to proudstutter.com. That's kind of like a central spot where you can listen, get involved, and yeah, just keep up with what we're doing.
And again, for people who don't have any personal connection with stuttering, like I would still recommend it. It's the people that you talk to have fascinating stories, and you ask fascinating questions and are fascinating yourself. I think the work that you do makes you inherently fascinating, um, and interesting and worth listening to. And just to close out here, I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done and you continue to do. I know I sound like a broken record, but it really has. Your show really has affected me personally in a very profound way, and really put a lot of wind in my sails for going forward doing this podcast. So I I appreciate you and the work that you do very much.
And thank you for just reaching out and being like an advocate. I think like the more of us there are, the better off people who stutter will be. So thank you too.
I I I try my best. I try to to push through. So I know I said we're wrapping up, but you know, I do find it kind of ironic sometimes, and you must think about this all the time. Like podcasting and stuttering make strange bedfellows, right? Because it's a medium that that the primary feature of which is literally your speech. um,
Mhm.
and I know for me that was definitely a consideration of whether or not I was actually going to go forward and make this podcast. I've been thinking about it for years, um, and obviously there are all the reasons. There's time, and there's um, does anybody care what I say? Like, do I have a good spin? But it's also I stutter. I literally have trouble speaking, and it's unpredictable.
Mhm.
And how will listeners respond to a voice that is not speaking quickly or clearly or the way that they're used to hearing voices on their headphones, right?
Mhm.
um and I'm sure you must have gone through a similar thought process. It's something I still think about. So I've been doing this show for almost a year now. Um, I still think about that, and your show, no joke, I think is really what definitely gave me the confidence and continues to give me the confidence to keep at it. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'm that makes me so happy, and that's really what what the show is all about. It's just like giving you what you need to just push forward and not let the stutter hold you back.
Absolutely. So please check out Proud Stutter. You just search Proud Stutter in your podcast app of choice. You can Google it. You just search Proud Stutter and all the things. It comes up. It's the first thing that comes up. Um, so Maya, thank you again, and watch Andor. Watch Andor. You will not be disappointed. I promise. Or maybe you will, but I still think it's worth a shot. It's a fantastic, amazing show. If you liked what you heard, please visit trashcompod.com, where you can find transcripts of this episode and all of our other episodes. And we are Trashcompod across all social media. And we will see you on the next one.